Hi everyone, my name is Elizabeth Quiroz. I am a survivor of human trafficking. I am a survivor leader here in California, and I'm also the co-founder of an organization called Redemption House of the Bay Area that serves trafficking victims here in Sonoma County and also in the Bay Area. Some of the stuff I might say might be triggering, and that's okay. If anybody wants to take a break and then come back, that's fine. So my trauma started at the age of 4, physical abuse and sexual abuse. And I come from a family of alcoholics, gangs, criminals, and gang members. There's a lot of generational cycles and generational curses within my family. I know that the enemy was out to get me for a very long time. And I grew up in a single parent household. I grew up in poverty. And my single parent was my mother. And my dad wasn't in my life like that. I was always looking for a father figure, but I didn't have that growing up. And so my mother raised me. My mom was very abusive. She was very angry. She was very hurt, but that's because she was abused as well. That's where I mentioned that there's a lot of cycles within my family. So my mom was also abused growing up. And so she was implementing what she knew at the time. And I choose forgiveness today. I understand why she did what she did. I'm not excusing it. I just understand from a bigger picture. Everybody's healing journey is different, but for me, I choose to forgive because it sets me free. Basically, growing up, I was physically abused and there was some sexual abuse that took place as well. And because of the trauma I endured in my single parent household and in poverty, I was a cutter. I started cutting my arms and I started self-harming because it was a way for me to cope. It was a way for me to leave reality and to just kind of disconnect from what was happening. I remember as I got older, I went to school and I would get beat up at school because I had ripped clothes. My hair was messed up. My teeth were crooked. So I wasn't dressed like the other normal kids were dressed. And so I would get beat up. Getting beat up at school and then coming home and receiving the abuse. It's just like, where was I feeling safe? I wasn't feeling safe at all. And I didn't feel that anybody loved me or cared for me. As I got older, at the age of 14, I was raped by an older man. He was 21 years old and I was 14. And I didn't know what was happening to me was rape. But at the time, I just thought because I thought I liked him that it was okay. And it's not. And at that age, you can't consent anyways to sex. Because of that situation, I just continued to go down this path. And then eventually I landed in the foster care system. So I was placed in the foster care system, I want to say, yeah, right after that situation, I was placed in the foster care system because of the abuse that was happening in my home. And so when I was placed in this home, the parents were also abusive. And so I didn't feel safe in that environment and I didn't feel safe with my mom. So I felt like, well, where can I go? And I thought maybe going to my dad's. Even though my dad wasn't in my life, he was still around. He was still somewhere else in a different city. I was able to run away from that situation and go to my dad's. And so when I got to my dad's, he wasn't expecting me to show up at his doorstep, but I did. He was an alcoholic and he was an ex-gang member as well. So my dad didn't have any parenting skills. I came with PTSD. I had a lot of trauma. I was very suicidal. And I just had all these things I was going through. My needs weren't being met when I was with my father. At the age of 15, I was going to high school and I started flunking my classes. I started hanging out with older people. I started ditching classes, bad grades, experimenting with drugs. I just, went down this really dark path. Eventually, this man came up to me when I was standing in front of my dad's job and he said, "Hey, you're beautiful. You're gorgeous. What's your name?" When he was telling me all these things, it literally drew me to him because I was never told I was beautiful growing up. I wasn't given attention. He was like a father figure. That's kind of how I looked at him, oh, well, this man is paying attention to me and he looks like he can protect me. And so it just drew me in. We exchanged numbers and we just started hanging out. He would take me out to eat. He would give me drugs. He would buy me clothes. And so he was spending so much time with me. At that time, I was 15. He was 27. And he told me he was 19, but I was super naive. And I believed everything he was saying. But in reality, he was a grown man. She had no reason to be with this child. And so eventually I ran away with him. I was in San Francisco at this point. We were on 16th and Mission. He would take me out there and start showing me the ropes of the game. When you're in the game, there's so many rules and things that you have to learn to live on the streets. He started showing me on how to be a drug mule. And so I remember, being down there on 16th and Mission in San Francisco, holding on to drugs on, areas of my body. As a woman, we have private areas where we put drugs. I was putting drugs in my mouth to hold on to it. I was holding on to his drugs while he was making the transactions on the streets. And this is where he started training me to look down on the floor. I wasn't allowed to look at any other men in the eye. If I did that, that meant that I was that man's property, but in reality, I was his property. So this is how he trained me to look down on the floor for years throughout the correctional facilities. When I had probation officers, parole officers being arrested by law enforcement, they assumed I was an addict or a criminal. That's why I was looking down. But in reality, it's because I was trained that way. So I remember there was this one time where I had to look up because I was with him, all of his homies downtown. And I wanted to make sure I wasn't getting step on anybody because I was looking on the floor. And then he slapped me in front of his friends. It really instilled this fear in me and degraded me and made me feel I was like worthless. I was like just an object. And so I just took that mindset, especially with the abuse I endured as a child. Pretty sure a lot of you have heard of adverse childhood experiences where you experience this trauma situations as children. So everything I have developed, I took that into my adult years. Even when I was being abused by my mom, at night she will hold me and tell me she loves me. So all the beatings throughout the day just kind of went out the window. So that's why when I got into this relationship with this man, because he was very physically abusive as well, I thought it was okay. I thought it was a form of love because I experienced that as a child. When you start to learn more of adverse childhood experiences, you start realizing it all ties in. When I was with this man, thinking that this is normal and it's not, he got arrested. And he sent a woman to me. This woman and the guy I was with at the time, they were both from the same prison gang, but I couldn't catch on. Like, I was super naive and I was young and I didn't understand what was going on, but they were both from the same prison gang and they were both working together, but I didn't know that. So he sent her to me and she said, hey, I'm here to help you. I'm here to show you how to make money. We're going to make money because you got to take care of yourself. And you need to take care of your boyfriend that's locked up. So this is a form of Romeo pimping. When you learn the terms in the human trafficking movement, you'll learn that there's different terms of ways that people get trafficked. And so my way of being trafficked was Romeo pimping, which is with the boyfriend. My boyfriend was trafficking me. When she told me I needed to make money, I thought we were going to rob people and I thought we were going to, sell drugs. I thought there was different ways we're going to make money. She said, no, you're going to sleep with men. I'm like, I don't want to sleep with men. Like, I have a boyfriend. He's locked up. I had that mindset where I wanted to be loyal to my boyfriend. And that's what they teach you on the streets. Like, they teach you to be loyal to your boyfriend or be loyal to your girlfriend or be loyal to your gang or be loyal to your drug connect. Like, there's so many just loyalty right in the streets. So that's what I was being taught. And so when I said that to her, I don't want to do that, she told me I had no choice. That's just the rules of the streets and I can't break the rules. And she was a bigger lady than me. She was in her 40s and I was 16 at this point. And so I did what I had to do. She told me what to do and she showed me the ropes and I started being sold to these men out there on 16th and Mission, 17th and Cap, 20th and Shotwell. So those are blades, and blades are like a street where human trafficking, prostitution is basically taking place on this street. I remember there was times where I would be done being raped by a purchaser. I would get out the car and have to give my money to that lady. And I thought it was my money. And she said, no, give me that money. Soon to realize like, okay, well, she's taking all my money. So I'm doing this for what? It's supposed to be for me and to take care of my boyfriend. But in reality, she was taking the money. This happened for a while. And then eventually he got out. My boyfriend got out. And I felt like that he didn't know. I didn't know he knew, but I thought he didn't know. I felt like I had to tell him because of that loyalty within me. It was killing me inside because I thought it was a secret. So when I told him, he cried, fell down, cried. And he said, you know what? You broke my heart, but if you did it for her, do it for me. Show me how much you love me. I was crying myself because I seen him hurting. And I was like, yeah, of course. I did it for a complete stranger. I would do it for you. I love you. Like, I love you with all my heart. I'll show you. And that's really what a child wants. Just want that love and that protection. They're willing to do whatever to get that love and protection back. I told him yes. He dressed me up and he took me out to the same blade that I was being trafficked with the lady. And it was really... This is where I learned more ways to dissociate from my body. Of course, most of the time I had to be loaded, but the times that I wasn't loaded, I literally taught myself to dissociate. But I have learned this when I was a child as well, leaving my body when trauma situations took place. And so when I was in these cars being raped by these men, I had to detach. I had to literally like vision myself somewhere else on a beach or somewhere else in a park, not in that car. When you're being raped that way, you can't physically be there. And so I had trained myself to dissociate. And I remember there was times where I, would go to places or go to a broke down apartment and I would be in this room and be raped by these men repeatedly. One man will go out, another guy will come in, and my boyfriend was in the hallway collecting the money. I'm supposed to be his treasure. I'm supposed to be his love. Like, how can he just allow this to happen? At the end of the day, when that was happening at night, he'll take me home and give me a bath and love me and buy me food and tells me he cares about me and how beautiful I am. So all that stuff that happened just kind of went out the window. Same thing that happened when I was a child with my mom. He just bathed me with love. And so I thought everything was okay. Even if I went through all of that just to have that 10 minutes of him doing that, it was worth it to me because I just wanted love. I felt like every time that was happening to me with those men, I felt like a rose and a petal just continued to fall off of me. And I was like slowly dying. There's been times where I was raped and not paid and thrown out the car, or I had to rob a purchaser at knife point. And any of those times I could have died. I could have been murdered and my body could have been dumped somewhere. and nobody would even notice because there was no missing report on me. Especially, being a person of color, statistically, the numbers are high for people of color in human trafficking. Because of this trauma, it led me down a path of addiction. I was hooked on meth for about 12 years. It led me down a path of incarceration. My first arrest was when I was 16 for armed robbery. But I chose armed robbery because I'd rather do that than be sold to a man and be raped. Sometimes we have to understand, this is what I do with law enforcement when I'm training law enforcement. We have to understand and think outside the box and look at the bigger picture and why individuals do what they do. Why does a minor commit a crime or a child joins a gang? Why does this person sell drugs? Why did that person go do this? Like, we have to think outside the box and see why they do what they do, instead of assuming that they're automatically criminals and just throwing them behind bars. When I was arrested as a juvenile for that armed robbery, I was treated as a criminal. That was my first arrest, and I just continued down this path of incarceration. When I was 21 years old, that was my first drug charge arrest, and this is where I met my third trafficker. So at that point, at 21 years old, I had a third trafficker. This was a different form of trafficking. This falls under labor trafficking because he was my drug connect and he was giving me drugs to sell for him. So I was his drug runner. When that opportunity arose for me to sell drugs, to basically receive drugs on front status and to go and sell it and bring him back his money, I thought that was a better opportunity than compared to being sold on the streets, than making money that way. I didn't realize that there was so much more out there, like education. There were so many different careers, so many opportunities that God had for my life, but I didn't know. I was out there under this lie and stuck in this cycle of trauma and poverty, and under this lie that my life wasn't worth anything. That's why I was continuing to repeat these cycles. So when I got this opportunity to sell drugs, I thought that was a way better option. And when I was under this guy to give me drugs on front status, he would give me up to half a pound of meth to sell for him. I was addicted to drugs, so I was smoking my own supply. And being a female drug dealer, you get robbed as well. And so I was being robbed left and right. When I was getting arrested for drugs, for selling drugs, I would get out and be in debt again with this man. Even though I did the time and didn't say anything, I was still continuing to be in debt. So my debt kept getting higher. So it was kind of like now I was feeling like I was in a contract. And I was stuck in this revolving door and I could not get out because my debt was getting higher with this man. And there was times where I had to perform sexual activities with this man in order to even get out of this car. Like, I would go give him his money, he'd give me drugs, but I couldn't leave until I gave him oral sex. And I didn't want to do that, but I felt like I had no choice because I was in that situation. There was times where he kidnapped me because I owed him. In this experience, when I was kidnapped, this is how I know God was with me throughout that whole time. Now I know, but at that time, I didn't know that God was with me, protecting me throughout that whole time. I remember getting in the car and him telling me, because I had fake checks. I was cashing fake checks to be able to pay off my debt. I had a fake check and he said, I'm taking you to only 2 places. Because at this point I was hiding from him, but then he found me and he kidnapped me. So when he said, I'm taking you to 2 places in San Francisco, that's the only places I'm going to take you. And if nobody cashes your checks, I'm going to go ahead and take you to the hostro. That's what he called it. But it was actually the Blade. And you're going to make my money. And then I'm going to break your legs and I'm going to dump you somewhere. So when he told me that, I started becoming hysterical because nobody wants to be told they're going to get their legs broken and nobody wants to be sold on the Blade. But I felt like this was going to happen because in San Francisco at that time, it was hard to cash fake checks. A lot of the agents or a lot of banks knew when they see fraudulent checks. So usually when I would cash fake checks, I would go out of San Francisco. I would go to different cities. But when he said that to me, I was like, oh no, then that's not going to happen. But I had no choice. So he took me to the mission and took me to 2 places. The first place I went to, I remember going up there, I went to cash this fake check and they told me no. And I remember walking back to the car and I was like, oh my God, I only got one more place. So he drove me to another location. He said, oh, this is the last place. I remember getting out of the car and I was walking to that liquor store. And I was like, you know what, God, I don't know if you're out there. I don't know if you hear me, but I need you to help me. I really need you right now. Didn't believe because I didn't know because of everything I've been through. But at that very moment, I was very desperate. And so I prayed. And I remember walking into that liquor store and I remember going to that guy and I was hysterical. You can tell I was sweating. My hair was messed up. I was shaking. That guy didn't know the signs of someone that's being trafficked. He looked at the check. He cashed it just simple. Cashed it, didn't give me a hard time. And I remember like, oh my gosh, my heart dropped because I was shocked that he cashed it. So I grabbed the money, I turned around, went to the car, and I was relieved because I was going to be able to get out of this situation with my legs. So I gave him his money and I said, okay, now I'm done with you. I don't ever want to see you again. I don't want to work for you anymore. But I had no choice. He took me to another location. I had to give him oral sex and he said, here's more drugs. I'm like, I don't want that. I'm done. Like, I already paid off my debt. We're good. I don't ever want to work for you. And he said, no, you don't have a choice. He dropped me off with the drugs. And so like that revolving door continued to happen. I got pregnant, and throughout my pregnancy, I couldn't stop using. I couldn't stop being in a life. I couldn't stop selling drugs because I was in that mindset. I was in this cycle of poverty and addiction and criminal activities and being trafficked because it was normal to me. I didn't think any other way. I couldn't imagine myself going to school. I could not imagine myself having a career or being a mom. Couldn't imagine myself doing that. So how can I even care about this human being that was being formed in my belly? I remember there was times where I would be in the bathroom using, and this baby's, I'm huge and I'm using drugs, and the baby's kicking, and I'm like, and I'll tell God, why am I even here? Like, I just want to die. Like, how can I even be here for this baby? What do you want with me? I was like, just take me. So I couldn't be there to nurture the baby that was being developed within me. I did get clean a month before giving birth, so I was able to go home with my baby, but I had no connection with my baby. I continued that lifestyle of selling drugs, using, being trafficked, and I got arrested at 26. And that was my wake-up call. That was my moment where God used that whole situation to turn my life around. And so I ended up getting 5 years between two different counties, between San Mateo County and Sonoma County. My son did go with a relative. It broke my heart because I did lose a lot of time watching my son grow up. But in reality, I feel like God used that situation for my good and his glory. He was able to use that to wake me up, because if I did not get arrested, if that situation didn't happen, I would probably continue down that path. I'd probably be dead today, or my son would have been dead. Just never know when you're in that situation what could happen. And so I just look at it as a miracle. I started getting my life turned around when I was incarcerated, started to get clean, started to learn tools, started to get curious about God and learning more about him. I remember getting released, and I went to Women's Recovery Services, and that's where I learned about being a trafficking survivor, that there's no such thing as a child prostitute. I started to get my voice. I started to get this boldness and this eagerness to like give back to the community. Like I said, I started getting curious of learning about who God is when I was incarcerated, and I started to really feel him, feel that peace, feel that I was receiving a second chance in my relationship with him when I started my recovery journey. And then I met my husband. And so, I was being emotional. When I was released from Women's Recovery Services, I went back to school because I got my GED. So I was like, you know what, let me go get an education. At that very time, I was struggling because I didn't have any family here in Sonoma County. I was literally transported from a different county to here in shackles with the clothes on my back. So when I was released into the community, I had nothing. And so I knew I had God, and I had this eagerness to do something different. I didn't have my son because my son was with that relative. And so I was really fighting to get my son back. I was riding my bike everywhere, and I was living in a shelter. And so when my husband came along, God brought him in the very perfect moment when I needed that support. He seen everything I was going through. He seen the struggles I was going through, riding my bike everywhere, trying to get food. Because when you have a criminal record, you can't receive support from the government. So I had to go to different food banks to get food on my bicycle. I couldn't get a job because of my criminal record. So I was finally landed a job as a busser. I was literally starting from the ground up and then living in these shelters. And so he came and he seen the struggle I was going through and helped me. He would pick me up, take me to my job. He would take me whatever shelter I was living at. He knew I needed a place to stay. And so he ended up finding a place for me. I ended up renting out his aunt's in-law. She had an in-law in the garage. So I moved into there. So now I had stability, not living in a shelter or an SLE. I had my own studio that I was renting out. And I just started going to school and thriving in school. And he supported me throughout that whole process. I started fighting, working towards getting my son back. He supported me throughout that whole process. So having somebody by my side and cheering me on, when I didn't have anybody, I really feel today that that's what God does. God's put people in your life to support you and get you to that place that you need to go. I met him in 2014. We got engaged and got married in 2015. And we've been married 9 years, together 10 years. And so we have a blended family. My husband has 4 kids. I have my 1 son, and I have a grandson. We both have a grandson. I went to school, Santa Rosa Junior College, graduated with 3 AAs, received a governor's pardon. So my whole criminal record is gone. Wow. Yes. And so I work as a social worker today with Dependency Legal Services. If I had a criminal record, that wouldn't have happened. So I know that God's doing miracles in my life. I, graduated with my associate's degree, went to Sonoma State, got my bachelor's, and then I went to Arizona State, got my master's degree, and now I'm currently at Liberty University getting my doctorate's degree in Christian leadership and ministry leadership. I'm just embracing everything God has for me. He's like, no, that's not where I intended for you. God forms all of us in our mother's womb, and he has a purpose purpose and a plan for each and every one of us. And sometimes the enemy comes in, he wants to distract us and get us off that path to reaching those plans. That's why it's important that we just continue to fight against all that pushback and that we just get our healing and reach those plans that God has for our lives, because it's beautiful. It's bigger than what we can imagine. Today, I'm the co-founder of an organization that serves human trafficking victims. Me and my partner, Lisa Diaz-McQuaid, she's another survivor. We both founded the organization in 2018. We're an established 501c3. We have our own office and we're just embracing the healing process, right? And we're also helping other survivors embrace their healing process and encouraging them and empowering them to find their voice, to give back, to heal, to become whatever God has for them and the purpose over their lives. If more survivors rose up and told their stories, I see it as a domino effect. I see it as mostly the solution of ending human trafficking, because when they speak their truth, when they speak their healing, when they rise up and find their potential and find the gold within them and the treasure within them, they are able to inspire others. They're able to inspire the other survivors that are watching, others that are watching from a distance. And you just never know what God will do in their lives. So they might want to rise up and start sharing their story. It's a domino effect. So that's why it's super important that survivors eventually start sharing their stories when they're ready. They're going to impact so many people that's been trafficked, even individuals that haven't been trafficked. They get inspired and they want to be part of the solution when they hear a survivor find their voice and talk about what they've been through and what they're doing today. So I feel that it is a big solution of combating human trafficking when survivors rise up to speak their truth.
So good, so good. So you are fighting human trafficking, throwing punches in so many different ways, but how can others also join the fight against human trafficking?
So I want to encourage everyone that's watching this to join the anti-trafficking movement in combating human trafficking. Human trafficking is modern day slavery. This has been around for decades, for generations, and it's time that we end it. It's time that we stand up and fight for those that are voiceless. So I encourage you, even if you haven't experienced human trafficking, I encourage you to do webinars, to attend trainings. Look up Redemption House of the Bay Area. We offer trainings, 1-hour trainings, 2-hour trainings, 4-hour trainings on what to look out for, the risk factors, the red flags. Who are the traffickers? Who are the purchasers? It's a community effort, not just survivors stepping up and using their voice to help combat human trafficking. We also need individuals that are outside. We need all community members to come together and connect to help end human trafficking. And I would encourage you to look up my book called Purified in the Flame. It's actually on Amazon. You can also check it out on the Redemption House's website. And in this book, I talk about my journey from the very beginning to what I'm doing today. And I talk about all the red flags. I talk about the experiences, the ways I was entered into trafficking, what the terms are, and what to look out for, and what happened when I got into interactions with law enforcement, and how law enforcement can do better, and what we can do as community members. And so I talk about all of this. So I encourage you to get my book and read it. I just feel that God's using everything that happened in my life for my good and his glory. And so that's why I just sit here today, just bringing honor to him and just like showing you and telling you that what God has done for me. It's just a miracle today, and I'm just super grateful.